welcome to this brand new season of Leaders of Tomorrow, the only enabling platform for small businesses. Over the past 7 years, we understood what matters the most to you, the small business entrepreneur. And in our 8th year, we're taking head-on 2 of your most pressing concerns, that of funding and mentoring. I'm Sananda Jayaseelan. Tonight on the Leaders of Tomorrow Season 8 Grand Launch episode, we're bringing you part 1 of a special panel discussion that I did with some of the most influential voices from industry. Let me first up introduce Ashish Chauhan, MD and CEO of BSE, Ajay Kela, President and CEO Wadhwani Foundation, Samina Vaziralli, Executive Vice Chairperson SIPLA, A. Velumani, founder ThyroCare, and Roopa Kudva, MD Omidyar Network India. They spoke with us about creating opportunities for tomorrow's new age entrepreneurs, pressing concerns over the credit gap in India, how small businesses must look at informal sources of borrowing, and much more. Take a listen. While we're talking small to scalable, the general consensus, and we've been speaking to a few experts ourselves, they're saying that a couple of things are critical for businesses. I just very briefly want to run through those when we're talking about scaling and what is essentially needed. Evaluate and plan. Find the money, find the sales trajectory, invest in technology, innovate, and most importantly, don't do it all yourself. This is open for everyone here on this panel. If you were to pick one of these, and I can run through them again, what in your mind perhaps do you think is the most crucial and why? And maybe I could come to you first, Mr. Chauhan.
I think all of them are important, but they are not like to be done separately. It's like when you make tea, you don't drink water separately, milk separately, and eat the tea separately. You put them in together and keep on boiling. And so it's an iterative process. They all have to go into one place together, and slowly you keep on kind of building on that. So wherever there is a requirement, you go in that, instead of saying that I need to invest in research or I need to invest in technology. So I keep on investing and don't worry about developing the market or developing the product and so on and so forth. For me, for an entrepreneur's life, it's very, very important that they take everything into account. They have meager resources, so they need to kind of go into every detail and use and allocate their resources in a much more sort of balanced way.
Okay. Ajay, would you say that it's like making tea? Everything is required, and as someone who is teaching entrepreneurship, could you pick one of these perhaps?
Yes, first of all, I do agree that it's not just one.
Okay.
But I would probably, if I were forced to pick, I would pick rather than the 7-3.
Okay.
And I would say the 3 would be mindset, mentor, and money.
Okay.
So first of all, for an entrepreneur, I feel they should have the mindset to scale. Want to be hungry to scale. Startup entrepreneurs have that. There is a whole bunch of SME entrepreneurs that reach a scale where they have their BMW, they have their bungalow, but the opportunity for their startup is to be able to provide BMW and a bungalow to each of the employees, and they just don't have that mindset.
Sure.
They back off. Second, I would say is don't do it alone, as you pointed out. The entrepreneur's journey is a tough journey. Leverage mentors.
Okay.
And the third thing is money will be required to scale and grow. And today there is lots of opportunities, the number of fintech companies that are getting funded. So we are opening up a channel.
So we're going to talk in depth as far as money is concerned, because that is, I would guess, the most relevant for any entrepreneur. But Roopa, let me come to you next.
Let me bring a slightly different lens. I can't disagree with what has already been said. But if you look at a very particular kind of entrepreneur who is kind of very much in the limelight in India today, which is the tech-led entrepreneur, focusing on starting a business which is aimed at the mass market. That is the lower middle income and lower income population, which is the big market. I would say a couple of things are important when you're getting started. Number one, get a good co-founder, because the entrepreneurial journey is long and hard. Number two, the product market fit. I think that becomes critical. And number three, assuming you get that, how do you acquire customers online, and how do you keep your customers engaged are the most important early steps to scaling.
Sure. Let me come to this side of the panel as well. Samina, Dr. Velumani, what would you have to say?
I think, everything you mentioned, these are fundamental building blocks. And in my mind in particular, I think is, know what your plan is, follow a plan, have that in place, make sure the plan is dynamic. I think it's also around building capability, and the capability not for today but for tomorrow, and for a scale that's larger than what you are today. And I think having the right talent and capability is very, very fundamental as you kick off this journey. I think the other important thing is know who your customer is. Who are you serving, and what is that unmet need that you are providing, either as a product or as a service that others are not. What is your USP? I think those, to me, would be the most important.
Okay. Dr. Velumani?
Yeah, to scale up, you must need first courage, because you are entering into newer geographies.
Yeah.
In fact, none of those which you have said has what I have in my mind.
Okay.
One is HR, that you have said as co-promoters. Another is logistics. Third one is IT.
Okay.
Without these three, scaling up is going to be a nightmare. Number one. Number two, I think businesses are hundreds of verticals. In your vertical, in your deliverables, is it scalable? First you have to understand. I keep telling in the entrepreneurial forum, don't take Mercedes in a runway and don't take jet plan in a highway. If you have a jet, please be in runway. If you have a Mercedes, you be in the highway. Don't scale what is not scalable, and don't just ignore that you have got a wonderful product and wonderful scalability. Somebody
And
else has
identify
built.
whether you have the car or the jet plane to
Very
begin with.
important. Analyze what you have got. Otherwise, you can't do it just because your neighbor is doing.
Sure. Fantastic. I want to pick up on one thing, and that's funding, and talk about some figures that we've picked up. And I want to come back to you, Mr. Chauhan, and really talk about the number of businesses that are listed on the BSE. 307 SMEs listed on the BSE SME with a market capitalization of about 17,000 odd crores. And in the 8 years that we've had the BSE SME, I understand about 66 companies have now come onto the mainframe. My question is, in a country that has 36 million odd MSMEs as we speak, why aren't we seeing more businesses that are listing?
The way I look at it is there are ways to fund now. Earlier, to get more funds, many people do bootstrapping. And then earlier they used to come to the markets. Now there are angel funds, there are even individual investors putting in large sums in many companies. There are venture capitalists, there are private equity players. And so the listing, in some ways, companies are coming when they want to actually monetize some of the gains. They want to go as late as possible into the listing, unless, of course, you are not finding a private equity or venture capitalist to back you up, which, in my opinion, the markets are much more efficient to give you the capital, to ensure that they also keep you in check and do not give differential rights to different people. And that's where I think, although 6-7 years back, we started this, and 300 is not a bad number, because rest of the world doesn't even have those 300 companies listed on their SME segment. The largest issue for SMEs to come on the market is basically the cost of raising capital. The cost of raising capital in public markets is slightly higher than it would be on the private market, and that's where they tend to realize at some point that if you want to raise 1 crore and you want to spend 25 lakhs to just raise that fund, you're getting effectively only 75 lakhs. Or if you want to raise say 10 crore, the cost might be 50 lakhs. And so you may not want to kind of spend that kind of money. But overall, the kind of publicity you get by listing on markets, actually public markets, is very, very good. And that's where more and more people who are becoming aware are coming to the markets now.
Time for a quick break. On the other side, we'll continue bringing you highlights of the panel discussion. Just stay tuned. Welcome back with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow tonight, bringing you highlights of an exclusive panel discussion that we did with some of the biggest experts in the country, talking about the opportunities and challenges for small businesses. Listen. This question is open for the entire panel, and season 8 of the Leaders of Tomorrow spoke with the MSME minister, where he's admitted that yes, banks are not perhaps lending as much as they should be to small businesses. The Prime Minister on his part, for instance, has announced several schemes, 1 crore under 59 minutes, etc. Those policies are in place, but what's not happening are the disbursements. To this entire panel then, where is that mismatch happening? What do you think is really the pain point when it comes to lending to small businesses? Go ahead.
I think clearly, I think the small businesses are starved for credit. So it's a big engine for the GDP of Indian economy, which is low on fuel. I think things are set to change there. What is the reason banks were hesitating to lend to small businesses? There were 2 reasons. Number one, it was very hard to get information for underwriting. And number 2, the cost of reaching and servicing that customer was very high. And both of these things are now being addressed by digital. So we think that because India is now becoming a data economy, with the formalization of the SME sector, SMEs are creating a large transaction scale. And so I think that the information issue is being addressed by alternate forms of data and information, and the access issue is also being addressed through the digital platforms.
Okay.
So in that way, banks don't give loan when you go there. But if they want to give a loan, they will come to you and they won't allow you to sleep. Having said that, for small needs, there is some small banks, there are big needs, some big banks. I have a reason to believe the pitching is not done properly, number 1. Number 2, he needs more money for expenditure, not for investment. I don't think banks motivate people to spend rather than investing. But I am of that opinion, funds is not a problem as long as you have got a business model, profitability is there, scaling up is needed. I don't think there is a challenge.
When you think pitching, you're saying that the entrepreneur is not sort of presenting his business?
Yes, I think they need a lot of education on what to talk, how to make a presentation. Packaging is very important, which very often is missing.
Okay. Ajay, you in fact, when we started this panel, were talking about funding, and funding is something so crucial for entrepreneurs. So in your mind, then perhaps where is that shortfall happening?
I think the panelists have already mentioned where the holes are, and the holes are on both sides. On the bank side, they are afraid, they are scared because they don't have enough information from the other side. On the other side, they don't have the skills and wherewithal to make a pitch to these organizations. But things are changing, with credit scores coming in, where SMEs are now getting evaluated based on their credits. Will make it easier. We already talked about fintech. Other channels are opening, where now you have companies like Credex that are doing invoice billing that makes it easier for individuals to loan at a significant amount.
Kind of look at it, the banks have norms. So if you have so much equity, then they can use so much loan. That's called debt equity ratio, and there are many other norms. So if you don't have equity, it's not easy to get debt. Every bank who lends you wants some collateral. Usually clean loans are available for mudra, but on a larger scale, you have to go for something in hand, and that is your equity. So when you don't have equity, it's very difficult to get loans, whatever we say. Even if it's 1 minute, 5 minutes or 5 days. If you don't have equity, and how do you get equity? You get equity basically by profits which you plow back in, or bring money from your family or friends, or go to somebody and get the funds raised for the equity. Then only you can go to the raise date, right? And so that's where most of our framework comes to mind, saying somehow banks have to give us the loan. But when we go to the banks, they end up saying no, but where is your equity? And that's where either you have to learn to go to the angel funders or to the venture capitalists or to markets. And markets in a way are easier because in venture capitalists you have to convince 1% or 2%. If they don't get convinced, then you're out. While in markets there are millions of people, some of them buy your story. Of course, as Mr. Velumani said, you need to have a story, which is not only a story but reality, right? And for me, converting, people have to be confident that your story is going in the right direction. It has some legs, that is, they have a proof to believe, and then of course that will scale up to where you want to go.
Okay, fair enough. Two of our panelists have spoken about fintech, and I have some more data that I just want to sort of run this panel through, and this is open for everyone on this panel. In June of this year, the RBI has said that the total addressable demand for formal external credit is about 37 trillion, but supply is 14.5 trillion. That works out to a credit gap of 20 to 25 trillion. Is technology the answer to that? Is fintech, is digital lending the answer to that? Or is there something more that we should perhaps be looking at, and this is open for everyone?
Technology will be an enabler.
Yeah.
But the source resides in individuals, and so take the example of angel investors.
Sure.
There are many now, you take the Marwaris and Indore as an example, with deep pockets. They have begun to see the returns that are coming to some of the angel investors from all the other tech businesses that are going public or they're getting large funding from PE firms. But they need to be educated. So educating HNIs to become angel investors is a first step. Then bringing them on a platform where it is easy to connect to them to an entrepreneur, and also probably handhold them through first few investments. So you can expand the pool where the wealth resides in the country, and you need to go just beyond just the banks and traditional sources of loans.
Sure.
Other types of smaller businesses, right? I think while Ajay kind of outlined one scenario, another scenario could be small businesses like small beauty salons or say a small restaurant owners. These are also very important small businesses for India, and they cannot go through this route. For them, I think the opportunity is going to be not too far away, where they can go for formal sources of borrowings, because today these are the people who borrow from informal sources. That gap that you mentioned is actually being met from informal sources at a very high cost.
Yes.
And it's for people like this that I think digital credit has a big role to play.
Sure.
The other part is basically a lot of working capital. Like you mentioned, that the demand is 37 trillion rupees and the supply is only 14.5, 15 trillion rupees. A large portion of an SME's fund is actually in working capital, because they are the lowest level of the chain, and the larger and larger companies take material from them, take whatever from them, but don't pay in time.
Sure.
And so with even this, it's also true with the government. They take a lot of taxes, but they don't refund. So recently, the Honorable Finance Minister announced that the GST for MSME will be released in, say, 30 days.
Yeah.
That's a great news. For me, a large portion of the working capital get released probably from this 37 trillion, probably at least $5-10 trillion will be released even to the MSMEs. But that doesn't mean that the larger companies will not eat up that, because every small and medium sector enterprise or entrepreneur wants to sell more so that there is more margin, but they don't calculate how much of that their own funds are getting stuck into that working capital chain. The other part, which has also been mentioned in the budget, is basically saying how do we get the MSMEs paid faster, not only the tax part, but also the normal functioning, whatever their bills are. Especially the government is trying to create a new portal for paying to MSMEs very fast whenever they raise bills. And for me, that is the fintech part of it on a scale which has not been seen before. We are seeing fintech in different parts and corners of India, but this is like hugely fundamental change, that GST getting released, the refunds, or the government companies paying up small companies, or governments themselves paying small companies in a very fast way on a transparent portal basis. I think they'll release a lot of funding, and people may not require this 37 trillion rupees, but probably a little less. And then, of course, what they said about getting the funds would be very different.
All right, that's all we could manage to pack into the show tonight. But tomorrow we will talk and bring you those takeaways from that expert panel in terms of what you should do if you're part of a family-owned business, and also what the role of the government ideally should be and is for small businesses.
If I look at it, for the small borrowers, the collaterals are more solid.
And the bigger collaterals were quite often, shallow. And that must be one of the reasons why that percentage is far high.
Okay.
And honesty must be there more for a small man to become big man. And the big man has already become big man, and he probably is not worried about what's going to happen.
Completely out of time on this show. If you have any feedback for us, our contact details are coming up. We love hearing from you. So do continue sending in your comments, your feedback and your thoughts. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good night.